The optics of what just happened here, can Donald Trump continue to use them to his benefit?
I think that we've seen him yet again use it to his advantage politically, at least with Republican primary voters. What he does is almost this playbook to get ahead of indictments. He usually announces them himself before the Department of Justice can announce it. His campaign really sort of casts it as a witch hunt. They try to cast it as like yet another witch hunt, and they make the argument that Americans are becoming desensitized now that we're on the third indictment. And then they use it to fundraise. And they almost have like an indictment playbook at this point. And we're seeing them do the same thing this time. I'll be really interested to see in the next week how much money they raise off of this and how they try to use this politically with 6 months until the Iowa caucuses.
Well, and then that money they raise off this potentially pays the oncoming legal fees, and we're going to potentially see them brush off the playbook for the indictments when it comes to Georgia. I want you to take a listen to what one of Trump's lawyers is saying. He's going out and he's saying Trump didn't try to pressure Pence to stop the certification of the election. What he was doing was just trying for a pause. Have a look.
He had an advice of counsel, a very detailed memorandum from a constitutional expert who said, Mr. President, these states are complaining about what happened. You, as the executive, have the ability to ask Vice President Pence to pause the vote on January 6th, have these states audit and recertify, and that way we know ultimately who won the election. And that's the only thing that President Trump suggested.
Well, that's not how former Vice President Mike Pence remembers this conversation. Take a listen to his response.
Let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued.
The vice president, who's all over this indictment, is saying it's not a pause. It was an outright, he was asking me to outright make a rejection. Do you see this, Mike, as Mike Pence starting to potentially really start to push back and criticize the former president? Will this continue?
Well, we can expect him to escalate this. He began this narrative all the way back in March at an exclusive dinner here in Washington, where he said that history would hold Donald Trump accountable for his actions on January 6th. And we're seeing him ratchet this kind of rhetoric up, not only because he is concerned about how he is being portrayed for the history books, but also because he himself is seeking the Republican nomination. What Pence is also portraying is much more in line with what Jack Smith put in his indictment, that it really wasn't just a question of free speech, which every American has the right to say, I think there is fraud in the election. What Smith is alleging and what Mike Pence is supporting here is that Donald Trump took it a step further and went much beyond the law and did so in a knowingly fashion.
We heard that crackpot lawyer line twice yesterday, one on the stump, one on the interview. Nancy, is this a new emboldened Mike Pence? He seems to be feeling a little bit different now that he's actually featured so prominently in this indictment. He's being called a star witness whenever this trial actually begins. Is Mike Pence Donald Trump's greatest worry right now?
Well, I don't know if he's Trump's greatest worry, but it's definitely, you know, the next few weeks are crucial for him. He is trying to raise enough money and get enough support for donors to make it onto that Republican debate stage on August 23rd in Milwaukee. This is really a crucial moment for him. And this is a message that he's using to try to break through, you know, get on the news. As Mike said, he mentioned this at this big dinner in Washington that a lot of people were at in March. So I think that he's taking every opportunity that he can to put himself out there, and this is one way to do that on the campaign trail.
But Nancy, what about the others? You know, Governor DeSantis said that he can't get a free and fair trial in Washington, D.C. Governor DeSantis isn't criticizing this, and if you read this indictment, it's pretty damning.
Well, none of the Republican candidates are, with the exception of Pence and then former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Everyone is saying things that range from, you know, the DOJ is unfair, this is rigged, he's not going to get a fair trial, I'll pardon him. The Republican field at this point has been so freaked out and afraid to take on former President Donald Trump, and that has been, none of them have been willing to do that. And, you know, I talked to a Republican strategist today who said that's really why none of them have broken through. He remains such a dominant figure, and no one has had or developed a message yet to take him on.
We heard from the former Attorney General, Bill Barr, who was on CNN last night talking about Donald Trump and the fundraising following the third indictment. Here's what he said.
I find that sort of nauseating. I mean, this guy claims to be a multi-billionaire, and, you know, he goes out and raises money from hardworking people, small donors, and tells them this is to defend America and to, you know, take care of the election. He didn't provide any significant support during the 22 elections, and a lot of this money seems to be going to his legal fees.
We've heard a few references to this at the table here. Michael, how long can that go on for? Or is that the plan? Will Hurd talked to us earlier today on Bloomberg Radio and said this is actually why Donald Trump is running for president, to get the money to pay the lawyers. Will he keep getting those $34 checks the more this goes on?
Well, that is what we're going to have to be watching, Nancy and I, very closely in the coming months. Can he keep up this flow of donations from those small contributors who share his sense of grievance, that the system is acting against him on purpose for political motivations? And will those people keep writing those checks? Will they keep it up? And he has, and you noted this at the top, Annmarie, that his legal bills are mounting. For the first 6 months of this year, almost half of what he took in to all of his campaign committees went right out the door to pay for his lawyers. And with now a third criminal indictment and arraignment behind him, and possibly more charges coming in Georgia, those expenses are not going to shrink.
Yeah, the legal bills are mounting, but the bench he has in terms of lawyers he can call on, that is starting to shrink.
What did Ty Cobb say? 80 million is what he was going for.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing.
Legal fees.
Which means also he's going to struggle to campaign a traditional way in terms of all the money you have to go out there to send out videos, et cetera. When you talk about campaigning, though, Nancy, since you're here, I do want to get, you wrote a story today, a scoop, about Tim Scott. He's heading out to East Hampton with people we know very well on Bloomberg, the likes of Stan Druckenmiller, Gary Cohn. Are the donors starting to line up behind Tim Scott?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that the donors had put a lot of hope on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He has made a lot of unforced errors, really since January. Donors that I speak to in my reporting have been very disappointed by him. And so I think the interesting thing to watch over the next few weeks is, does that money really start to flow to Tim Scott? Tim Scott already has a lot of Wall Street ties given his Senate committee assignments. And I think that there is a real opening for him to capitalize politically, but also in terms of just the fundraising with DeSantis' stumbles.